Welcome to Slacker Moto Radio with Brad and Addison. Based out of the Pacific Northwest, we're talking motorcycles and the motorcycle community, and we're excited to have this hour with you. Here we go. Welcome back, Slackers. Brad, how you doing?
I am doing great. It is an awesome day, a little bit of weather out there, but I rode in today. Every day riding to work is good. Can't complain.
What, huh?
What?
Brad doesn't ride motorcycles. If there's anything I've learned from our listeners, it's that Brad doesn't ride motorcycles.
From our listeners, that's great. Yeah, no, I got a motorcycle. I've been riding for the last couple of weeks. It's okay. It's all right.
You're riding?
Yeah.
Talk to us, man. What's going on?
Yeah, so I went to Burns, picked up my dad's V-Star 1300, and been riding that for the last couple of weeks into work. I put a couple hundred miles on it since I've got it over here, so that's been good. Man, it's awesome to be back in the saddle. It's awesome. It's good.
I believe that. Yeah, but that's a good, well over liter over what you're used to. How's that?
Oh, well, it's different. It's a different type of a bike. I mean, we've talked about this before. Liter bikes in general, depending on, the classification of the bike, can be quite different. But regardless, compared to the KLR, this is like, it's crazy. I mean, it's easy to get up to 70 miles an hour on this cruiser, but, that was almost top speed for the KLR. So you got to be a little bit more cautious, or at least aware of what you're doing, because it's so easy to just rip it to 70, 80 miles an hour. I mean, it is, especially if you want to start going through the gears and you're ringing them out. I mean, it moves. I mean, it's not a sports bike by any means. It's not made for fast shifts, but it's got a good grunt to it. It moves right along.
I believe that. Yeah, a 1300, especially a metric cruiser like that, it's got a little giddy up. Now, do you have a tachometer? What's the red line? How far can you rev that thing out?
It doesn't have a tachometer. It doesn't even have a fuel gauge, which is, other points that we can talk about that I think are just interesting. But it's about 6,500 RPMs is what I've seen. A couple programmers will let you push that a little bit if you want to mess with it. But yeah, it's I don't know. It's good.
1,300 cc's of two pistons. You probably don't need to push more than 6,500. I mean, that's a fair amount of mass knocking around on a somewhat. I imagine, how's the vibration? I imagine it's got a bit of a vibration.
It does. Now, one of the things that I'd noticed, and it's not a knock against my dad. I mean, the bike had run great for him. It had 51,000 miles on it when I picked it up. He put that on in about 5 years of commuting to and from Burns in Ontario, Oregon, for those that are aware of that area. But he rode it a lot, and he'd gone through several tires. Every 6,000 miles, he was putting new tires on of some sort, and placed the spark plugs every time he changed the oil. I mean, he did some awesome, maybe unnecessary at times maintenance. But one of the things that he didn't do was the valve lash adjustment ever. So that's one thing that, in alignment with that, and not having ever synced the throttle bodies, I think that some of the vibration will actually get a little bit better. Most of that I can see and feel is at low RPM, and you can hear a little bit of valve noise. So that's on my to-do list here in the next couple of weeks, is to actually pull the fuel tank and get in there and do some of that work. So it's not like major surgery by any means, but it's not simple, I'll say, to get in there and access this.
Is it a pushrod engine, or is it overhead cam?
Overhead cam.
Okay. So it's not an old school type V-twin. You've got some modern technology with an overhead cam. So you could rev it out a little further. Anyway, sorry. But yeah, as I say, pushrods will end up having a fair amount of valve noise anyway. But yeah, the overhead cam should be pretty quiet. So I imagine you're probably talking spring on bucket. Sorry, shim on bucket.
No,
it's still adjustable. Lock nut.
Yep.
Adjustable valves.
It's simple in that regard. I mean, I just got to go in there,
Yeah.
Put a feeler gauge in there. I mean, I'll probably make some tools to just make it a little bit easier, looking into it and kind of what it's going to take. maybe buy a couple things, but yeah, I mean, I've got to do this on the KLR too, and I've got a little bit of a progress update on that. Not running, but I'm going to be doing valve adjustments and everything on there as well. So, I mean, it's kind of seeming like that's kind of the season for me once I get to that point. So, I'll get practice on one, and then I'll just do the other one. Obviously different, but nonetheless, looking forward to that. So it needs a little bit of maintenance in that regard, but otherwise, yeah, I've been riding it, no issues. Runs great. Just other than I think a little bit of vibration stuff, and I think some of that will actually clean up. So not too worried about it.
I imagine, I imagine you'll get that taken care of pretty quick. Yeah, especially we talked about the specialty tools. I mean, if you're just adjusting a lock nut, really all you need is a good
I need a 3 millimeter
feeler gauge.
Yeah, I have to have a feeler gauge, and that's why I said I was going to make some. I was thinking about just going and either buying a relatively cheap feeler gauge set and checking it with calipers, and then actually cutting it off, bending it, and kind of making my own tool to get in there just to make it easier to access. Because of the design, you actually take these little covers off of the top of the heads or the valve cover, if you will. So it's just a little access cover. What is wrong? Why are you shaking your head?
Because it's just not that complicated. Get a good set of feeler gauges. They bend. You can just put them right in. You don't have to worry about this stupid garbage, specialty garbage crap.
I plan on being able to do this. Oh man, okay, that's
You
fine.
can do it with a regular set of feeler gauges.
I
Just get a
agree.
good
I agree.
set.
I completely agree. I'm not saying I have to have this. What's
Oh,
wrong with me making specialty tools? I love handmade tools. If you don't love handmade tools, then you can just go away. You have your own handmade tools, probably for ridiculous things too, Addison.
yeah, you're not wrong. I have all kinds of ridiculous tools. Some call me a ridiculous tool. Nonetheless, you don't need to do this. You're overcomplicating it. Just check your friggin' valves.
Okay. Okay. I'll just leave that alone. I'll do what I want when I do it.
But you do need a good set of feeler gauges to go back to our conversation on the right tool for the job. You do need to know whether your gap is correct there, but you don't need the specialty version with the correct 45-degree angle magic, yada, 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 unnecessary expense.
No, I get it. I got you. I'm not saying otherwise.
Just hand over your credit card and
Okay,
come
this is the
back
one
and see
thing
what
that
I
I've noticed. If you can tell me where you can actually buy a decent set of feeler gauges that are actually okay. I mean, because if you look on Amazon, one of the things that I thought was interesting, a lot of people are going to go look online to be able to buy something like this potentially. And there's lots of things that come up, anywhere from $5 to $20. They're all crap, in my opinion. After looking at them, there's very few that I would actually purchase. So people are using them. It's not that we're trying to get an absolute precise measurement for these valves. There's a range, and you just want to be able to get into it. Obviously, there's a side that you would rather be on with that range, but um, they're all relatively. You just need a set of feeler gauges. You could check them with no caliper, and you could just see how close it is. That's all I'll have to say about it. That's why I made the comment about I'll probably buy something cheap, cut it up, and because I already have a set of feeler gauges, I could do it to your point with what I have, but I could spend 5 minutes building a tool that makes it so I can easily get in there. I don't have to worry about trying to form this feeler gauge into the right shape to get it in there correctly. I'm okay with that.
Yeah. All right. Do what you want.
Okay.
Nonetheless, I would also argue that, especially with adjustable, screw type adjustments on your valves, or at least the valve lash there, you should be totally fine. I don't think you're going to see, right, just knock it out in the middle. You can basically get a dead on each of them. When you do the shim on bucket, sometimes you need to be a little more precise because sometimes based on how much wear you have on that previous shim, you're going to be on one edge or the other, whether you want to or not. You just can't get it without custom machining your own valve shims. You can't get it to the right level. So it gets a little bit more particular with this, right? Just pick the value in the middle of the range and adjust it right to that, lock it down, move on. You know what I mean? These screw type adjustable valves are so simple, especially once you've removed the cams to do a full shim on bucket type valve adjustment. Man, going back to the old school is like a dream.
Yeah, so I'm pretty happy that that's going to be simple. I've been concerned that I was going to have to do some shim work, but nope, not in this case. It's going to be pretty straightforward. So just have to do it. I'm going to build my own synchronization gauge that allows me to just have 2 ports going into it, be able to switch between the two. And so I've got a nice snap-on gauge that I found at a good deal somewhere. So yeah, got a couple things that I'm going to do to it, but definitely the focus is on the KLR, making pretty good progress. Got the new valves in there, lapped them in. So now I'm just in the process of cleaning things up. So gasket surfaces and everything are clean, but I actually have to clean out any of the ports, get them all scrubbed so I don't have any weird sediments in there when I put it back together. I want it to be nice and clean. And install the new valve stem seals and springs and stuff and be able to get that going. So that's pretty exciting as well. So continue making progress on that. Hopefully get that going so I can hit the trails with the group that likes to go out regularly.
By this summer, you're going to have both bikes up and running full speed.
Yeah, it should be good. I'm looking forward to it.
That's pretty impressive, man. You're getting a lot of work done on that. The question I have. So yeah, you've also got to adjust the throttle bodies. Now, what's involved there? Is there ECU? Can you just plug in and read out the voltage and adjust accordingly, or are you having to actually use a vacuum gauge for this?
Yeah, so the way that it says in the service manual is you just there's 2 ports up on top of the throttle body. You disconnect a couple hoses and you line some hoses into that from your gauge, and you're just balancing them out. It gives you a range on where that vacuum should be, and so pretty much you set one and then make the other adjustment, or make the other one so it's the same, right? So it'll be pretty straightforward.
Yeah, that's. You're basically carb syncing. That's pretty. Yeah,
well, I was really blown away. I was actually really surprised by that. I had no idea that was a normal thing to have to sync throttle bodies on a fuel injected motor. So, I messaged you earlier this week, and you're like, "Yeah, that's normal." I don't know. For whatever, intuitively, I didn't think that would ever be an issue. So it must be a relatively stupid system. I mean, just like a carburetor is kind of stupid. So I don't know. And what I mean by that is it's not monitoring all parameters and actually making adjustments in accordance to it. You set it, and it's assuming that everything's perfect, and then it uses whatever those settings are and runs its program for it. So, which is fine. It's just surprising.
Well, it's throttled by wire, so you've got 2 throttle bodies that are moving on the same, adjustment wire. And so if something backs out on the screw, or if you get a little wear on the touch point, that's all it is. So I've had to check it on the scrambler for throttle bodies, on the Stripple for throttle bodies, and then you do the same thing when you're syncing 2 carbs, right? Same kind of idea. Rarely are they out of sync unless you've got like crazy wear or a lot of sitting and rust, type deterioration of those components. Chances are you're going to get into that part of it, and they're going to be pretty darn close the second you open it. If it's running
the question is, what do you think the service interval is on throttle body synchronization for that V-Star?
My assumption, so let's start with this. The oil change is what, 4,000-mile oil change?
I think it says something like 6,000, but sure, whatever.
6,000, okay. So I would assume you're probably talking a 12,000-mile throttle body sync.
Every 6,000 miles.
Every 6? That's insane.
Yeah, no, this is something that my dad never did. And I'm not saying that there's an actual issue with it. I'm just going, whoa, that's frequent.
Yeah, that's too much.
The valve adjustments every, like 16,000 miles.
Okay.
But every oil change is, they suggest doing a throttle body synchronization. I was just really surprised by that. I couldn't believe that was the thing.
I 100% agree. I would have assumed every valve adjustment is basically what I was trying to assume on my every other oil change. That's how the Scrambler was some stupid amount. I think it was 7,000 mile, 7,500 oil change. Anyway, some ridiculous amount that seemed too much. But yeah, every other oil change, you're supposed to check the valves and adjust the throttle bodies. But for that, it was actually incredibly easy because you plugged in the ECU and it would actually read out the voltage of both throttle bodies, and you just had to tweak the screw to get them to match. So it was like a 3-second job because you just pulled the seat, plug it in, run the bike, make an adjustment, move on. There wasn't, you didn't have to, there was very little, some vacuum gauges when I sync carburetors, because of the air fuel mixture screw, there is a lot of noise at low RPM. And you may find the same thing with a throttle body, especially cold. So you want to make sure it's all warmed up to do this, because I think you'll get less of that with a fuel injected bike. But it can be really noisy with the vacuum gauges at times, and so that's where having just a simple voltage readout was just the easiest thing ever. Plug it and run it, and the Stripple's the same way. It's just plug it in, read out what it says. If one of them's off, make the smallest and it is the smallest of adjustments. Like an eighth turn is way too much in most cases.
Yeah. I don't anticipate I'll have to do a whole lot, but I think it's worthwhile to just check. I did notice that it's trying to kind of rattle itself apart at these weird low RPM moments, and it's not horrible, but it's enough that I can understand why. Like as soon as I got it home, I noticed that the rear rack was broken, and so I'm going, whoa, that's weird. And then actually, it's got engine guards and stuff that seem to move quite a bit. And at least the chrome is cracking on one of them, but I believe it actually might be a material thing. So, I mean, it's just time to have some of these other things that I guess weren't that maybe he wasn't aware of taken care of. So, not a big deal, but kind of threw a wrench into just let it rip. So I got to do a little bit of work there, but it's all pretty simple, straightforward stuff.
No, that sounds awesome, man. Yeah, I agree. You know how I was with the DR. You get it, you just dive in for a weekend, get it all done, and once you have everything done and top notch, you're clear for a good amount of time before you got to worry about, especially if you're riding often. All that stuff, kind of, we were talking about with the throttle bodies a second ago, right? That it's really sitting and getting gunky or rusted that starts to wear things like that, not use, because it's not like it's hitting and banging and right. There's no actual physical mechanical movement there when you're using the bike. It's just deterioration over time. And so if you're using it, cleaning it, and it's getting wear, normal use, those things don't really go bad. The valves may be a different story, but those those are more use based. But I think you'll be good. I think it's a good idea to go through. And if you're already got the tank off, you're already doing the valves. At that point, throttle body's almost nothing.
Yeah, well, it's super simple. Yeah, for sure. Like, well, if you look at the service manual, it turns the valves into a quite an ordeal, and you do have to pull a couple coolant hoses in the process. But
really,
reading online, it sounds like it can be you can skip a few of the steps that they suggest. They want you to take the whole throttle body system off, and I'm like, that doesn't even make any sense. But whatever,
I'm trying to think. No, you can check the granted the DR is a big single, super easy, small little. Although a big twin should be just as roomy as a big single, quite frankly, for space to work on engine covers and case viewpoints or whatever we want to call them, inspection covers. So I imagine it wouldn't be as bad as they say, but I'm surprised they make it look complicated. I wonder if some of that's similar to kind of the Harley Davidson game of making it look like you shouldn't be working on your own bike and you need to take it in for service, when in reality, if you know what you're doing, you can knock it out in a couple hours.
Well, that goes to the point that I guess the reason why my dad hadn't been taking it in for service, one, they wanted him to do something where they tear down the entire bike and they evaluate how well they did for $1,200 to $1,600. And he's like, no, you're not going to tear down the whole bike just so you guys can see how you've done. Sure, you might be looking at the bushings as well, but no, we're not playing that game. The other thing is he took it in to have somebody do the tires one time and swap the tires, and they told him that they had to remove the saddlebags, and he knew for a fact that you didn't actually have to remove the saddlebags. They told him that they were going to charge him regardless. He had the work done, and he never had anybody do tires again. So he actually was swapping his own tires, balancing them himself, and everything. So, which is fine, but just goes back to, I guess, building. We've talked about this. You got to have a good relationship with your shop and know that they're doing good work, and be able to. You got to have a little bit of trust with them too. You got to just build that. Spend some time getting to know who they are, what they do, and feedback. Have somebody else that takes their bike and give you a good referral on where to go. I think is the first step with that.
Yeah, I think that's why a lot of shops and people, quite frankly, do the off tire tire changes. One, the cost is significantly less. Two, the turnaround is way quicker. And I've even got to the point now, I've done enough tires last year that I had no problem. I did a sport bike tire, I did a cruiser tire, and a dirt bike tire all within like a month of each other. And I mean, it's an exhausting job for that hour or whatever. It takes some time to spoon them off and spoon them back on, and it's somewhat heavy lifting, right? I don't know that my 6-year-old would be able to handle it. It's not an easy job, but it's also not that bad. And they're all perfect, and I'm a big fan of the Dynabeads for balancing, which makes balancing literally the easiest thing. You just pour a bunch of beads into the valve stem and call it good. It was just, and I took that to the track on the Stripple. I mean, I'm a fan. I think they work. I had no balance issues or wobble or weird feels when I was pushing the bike pretty hard for 2 days straight. So, yep, it's really just not that big of a deal. So kudos on him for doing all that work and not paying out the extra money. That being said, if time are an issue off bike, it's pretty quick to just drop off a rim and have somebody swap them out, within minutes.
Yeah. No, that's understandable. So you had mentioned the other day that Chicken Hawk was looking at a bike. Did he buy a bike?
He did not yet. And I'm
not,
hoping.
No, whoa. This sounded like the deal of a life. Like, what is going on here? Because I know he's going to listen to this, and so this needs to be public. What's going on?
I don't know that it does. Because I don't know that all parties interested or all parties within his household are on board with this decision. So I think this goes into a bigger discussion of what do you do when you need something or want something for your bike and it's not an insignificant cost. I think that's really the discussion here, right?
Something obviously, for your bike or a new bike? I mean, I'm just trying to understand here.
I mean, depending on what you're putting on your bike, for what he's getting or the plan he's trying to make, it's about the same discussion. It's a pretty screaming deal. It's a good option. He's looking at a higher CC cruiser. Actually, it's more of a sport touring bike, but he's looking for something that'll go the distance and not be stuck at, to your point, 65, 70 full throttle.
So he's going to be joining on the ride, the Slacker Moto ride. Is that correct?
No, but I'll tell you, if he gets this bike, I may steal it for the ride.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good option. We'll have that discussion if and when it occurs. But I think you bring up a really good point that we've had with a couple of friends of the show about what do you do when you want something, need something. Because, motorcycles for the most part are generally a want, at least in America. Most people don't rely on their bike as a full-time only vehicle. There are those that are better than I that do, and kudos to them because that is a need, right? If your tires wear out and that's your only source of transportation, then tires are a need and you better get some tires. But for those of us that have them as toys, as much as we use them, it's not an immediate need. When you want something big for your bike, what do you do? Right? How do you work that in? Because I think it's an interesting discussion. Do you keep track of what you buy? Do you track how much money and parts you put into your bike? I see the Craigslist ads where people put, I put all this money, each part cost X amount. Here's my $7,000 sticker price bike that has $14,000 worth of parts. Is that the right way to do it? What do you think, Brad?
So, okay. So there's lots of theories in this. I mean, keeping track of what you spend on anything and creating a spreadsheet. I love spreadsheets. Do it. That's my suggestion there. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think a lot of people that post things, just to be frank, I think just looked up the value of those parts at the moment that they did the listing. Some people do put together spreadsheets, and I know many that are very adamant about it and blow my mind. And this is coming from a guy that likes to create them, right? Or you could, at the same time, negate all of that because you don't really plan on ever selling it, right? Using that as an example, I think is one way. But there are those that I have heard have actually informed their wife that all that it was a sticker package for their dirt bike. It's not a new dirt bike. It's just a new graphics package for it. Do I think that that's the right way to do it when you buy a new bike, is to try to trick your significant other, your spouse, to believe that it's the same bike? I don't know. I would say no, but some people have done this. Maybe eventually they told them the truth, but it's still an option, right? Do I
Perfect
think that
disclaimer.
Chicken Hawk can try to justify the new bike and say it's the old bike with the new fairing package and body kit and everything? I don't think it's going to go over that well. I don't think it's going to happen. Sorry, don't use that, Chicken Hawk. Ain't going to work, yo. So, I don't know. I think that the best way to manage all this is to just really have like buy the right bike the first time. Like if you're going to spend that much money, buy what you really want instead of buying something that you think is going to be a decent deal and then having to invest just as much money into it. We've had this discussion with another viewer, Ryan, before, and to no avail. He still bought whatever he wanted, but we'll see how that plays out. Sorry, Ryan.
Yeah, and I think that's a great disclaimer that, I personally agree. I'm not a fan of making up stories or right, lying about the situation. However, I know, everybody's relationship's a little different, and I'm not saying that lying is ever right, but if really they know that you're running a game and that's right, the joke, then whatever, to each his own. But I do agree that there's also those that we know, some friends of the show, that talk about never keeping tabs, not keeping track of what you spend,
Intentionally,
because
yeah.
yes, because it can cause issues with understanding exactly what you spend. Where when you're buying, an exhaust pipe, a new muffler on this month, and then some brakes the next month, and tires the next month, right? It's within the budget per se, but then at the end of the year, circling back and looking at exactly what it all was can be a bit shocking, both for you and your own sport. Because let's be honest, most motorcycle parts and components, especially upgrades, are not cheap. So when you come back and look at exactly what you spent to make let's just use a really pie in the sky example, like maybe a Versys 300, and then you drop a lot of money into that to make it exactly what you want, right? At the end of it, you look at it and you think, well, what else could I have had with that money? And that's not the right way to look at it. So I actually have no problem with putting what you want in it to make it comfortable, to make it yours. But I
Yeah,
kind of agree with the
that's part
sentiment
of the
that,
sport. That's part of the sport. You buy a motorcycle to customize it. If you really want to go hog wild with customization, there's certain bikes that you should definitely gravitate towards.
I'll give you that 100%, that there are bikes that are much more readily customizable than others. But yeah, don't keep, if that's your game and it's not for the purpose of buying a bike so you can try it out, make it really cool, ride it for a few months, and then sell it so you can do that with another one, right? If it's not a project that you plan to sell, to your point, then there is only harm in keeping track of how much you spend on each part, at least within a running calculation, because you will
But
look back.
sometimes that's not always about the cost. It's keeping track of when you purchased items. Sometimes it helps you keep track of warranty for those items. I think those things need to be taken into consideration as well. But are you okay, sir?
I am. I agree. I think I know what you're saying, and we're both far too blanketist right now. We're not making very specific statements. So I agree that you need to keep track of what you buy, what it costs, and everything involved with warranty upgrades, because at some point, I'm a big fan of a build log, a big fan of pictures of your upgrades, pictures of your custom work. Nobody ever poo poos on a used car or a car at a show or a car in somebody's garage that they love, or a bike. I mean, we're talking bikes here, that has a great little binder full of everything done. Some people don't care and they won't look at it, but no one's ever negative on that. That being said, you don't need a running balance sheet at the end that says, here's the calculation of everything that's into it. In the end, I put $40,000 into my $10,000
Yeah,
motorcycle.
no, that's going to make you sick. But in general, hobbies cost money, and if part of the hobby is $300 a month, then that's $300 a month for whatever it is. Because people spend that kind of money on lots of different hobbies. If you're just going to do track days and have a track bike, just imagine how much that's going to cost. Yeah, you're not going to keep track of everything that you put into that bike. How many tires you went through going to track days for the last 5 years? It doesn't really make any sense at the end. But at least it lets you keep track of how often you're going to have to buy them. Like, when am I going to have to start looking at buying tires? I don't want to have to always be checking my tires. I just need to buy them in advance, and so they're ready, and it's when it's time.
Yep, and I think that's very fair. So yeah, for wear items especially, understanding their lifespan, things like that. Yep, really good reason to keep logs of what you're doing. That was actually one of the biggest. I don't know, biggest is the right word, but one of the things I learned from the MotoFit group is one of the first things they taught in the post lap or post session writers meeting for the green group was they handed out a binder, right, a little spiral binder, and said, "Hey, start logging your days. Start logging the temperature of the day, your fuel pressure, right? Keep track of this stuff because you'll start to find that as you do that and as you look at what that did for your lap times, what that did for your feel on the bike, for your cornering, you'll learn more what you should be doing from a day-to-day basis, both on the track, of course, when you're going specifics for, a few seconds better each lap, but as well when you're on the road, you'll know that, maybe on the stock tires, when this thing came out of the factory, it wanted 33 psi, but after riding a few laps on the track, I realized that 28 feels better on these Michelins rather than the Bridgestones that came factory or whatever it is, right? You're going to see that, hey, my setup that I prefer, my custom bike, doesn't necessarily match what it was on day one out of the factory floor. I need to make those adjustments. And if you write them down and have to go on some, terrible annual trip where you get to tour Europe for a year or something like that and come back to town, you're going to be able to just immediately jump on and know where to put things because you had it all documented. I know that's crazy.
Or you have to replace parts. Let's say you have a front fork set up, how your pressures and everything else is set up. Then you have to replace your front forks for some reason. Well, how did I have it set up? Well, I don't remember. Now I got to go through the development work to get it done or I can just reference my logs. So I think that's a good point. And two, go ahead.
Sorry. Especially if you're going with custom components. I've got a buddy with an old CB 350, 360. I'm trying to remember what his little bike. Maybe it's a 500, CB 500. Anyway, a small 80s CB Honda. And he's got a custom rear suspension, custom forks that came off of he doesn't know what. And right now the forks are leaking. How do you know what fork seals to buy? It didn't come with a log of all the custom work done. It was just completed. The dude wrote it for however long and then sold it, right? And so there's not an indication of what he needs. So, even beyond what you need and going back to that, because I would be willing to bet that dude doesn't remember which forks he got out of a scrapyard when he threw them on or off of eBay when he threw them on to upgrade the front suspension on that bike. And so when you need that stuff, now you got to remove everything, completely disassemble, run measurements to figure out which seals you need, which springs you need, how much oil you need. You've got to go and reverse engineer the entire front suspension. When if you just knew that it came off of a CB750 or whatever it was, a larger bike with better suspension, then you could say, hey, that's what I need is a kit for that bike.
Yeah, no, that's the time when logging stuff is absolutely crucial for sure. Not just in the motorcycle world, but I have plenty of vehicles as well where somebody has changed out steering, suspension, whatever, and it's very frustrating trying to find parts when you don't know what parts they are. So definitely write that stuff down. I guess the question is, we didn't get into any of your builds. Talking about all these builds, costs, accumulating. We can even incorporate total number of projects. How are yours going, and when will you be buying your next bike?
Man, you are pushing hard. We're month 3, almost month 4 into the year. You are pushing to already hit your goals, man. Don't worry.
Hey,
you've still got.
It didn't help none that you bought a bike within like a month, a couple of weeks of the prophecy being made.
Oh man, similar to the Chicken Hawk, sometimes deals come up that just are hard to pass up. That one was probably one of the better buys I've ever made, quite frankly, because I am really enjoying. I rode it just the other day when I went out of town or went around town here. It got cut real short, but even just that little jaunt down the neighborhood, that's a fun little bike, man. And I'm getting more and more comfortable.
Which one are we talking about? The DR?
The DR650. That thing is more fun than I thought it would be, and I think a little suspension and some fresh meat on the some fresh shoes on it. It's going to be a pretty awesome summer dual sport riding bike. I'm actually worried I may neglect the Stripple too much this summer because it's a very fun bike. But anyway, yeah, what have we done? So we are all buttoned up and getting everything taped off. Well, so GL the Gladiator has an engine, rear case, front case, all buttoned back together. So we've got a full block, assembled, bearings, seals, everything new, ready to go. And really, at this point, fresh gaskets. At this point, I've got to pull off all the accessory components, mounting hardware that I don't want to be a dark black. That's a matte black engine paint that I'm going to do and then bake. But yeah, so I've got to basically get it ready for paint is where we're at on that. From that point, we can button it all back up, including cooling and starter motor and all these things that I don't necessarily want to paint the same color or mix materials. And then, begin getting it back in the frame so we can start mocking up and tacking on the rest of the frame improvements. And from that point, it's a clear path forward at this point. Spent some time getting that all buttoned up and done. That's been the focus over the last couple weeks, was getting the things that I've really been putting off on that completed. With regards to the JT1, I also ended up getting the parts I needed to finish where I was at, and it's basically ready. I mean, the frame's painted, components are painted, it's at assembly point, but when I went to go start assembling the front suspension, it was just, everything's so pretty now that it's freshly painted and powder coated. It was really hard to put a couple of old rusty crown nuts and things like that. As much polishing as I did, they're just a little pitted, and they're bad, and they're so inexpensive online that it was just worth replacing some of these things. So I put it in order. Unfortunately, a couple of them were on back order for a few weeks. So I need to wait for some parts to get in, and we'll move forward with that one. That being said as well, I know I've said that being said 16 times. I know. The important thing to remember on these, though, is for most of these, there actually is a pretty good tracking sheet of what's been spent and what's been done, because I don't know that all of them will float in my possession for a significant period of time. I plan to have them all available on the site once they're done. Obviously, we'll get some test time in and some good rides and some fun on them, but every project, it's like Legos, right? Half the fun is building it. So once these are done, we'll see. There's always an opportunity to get rid of them and start another one.
Okay. Looking forward. I'm waiting. I know it's going to be this year, maybe even 2 more bikes as far as, how the year's going so far. We're only 3 months in, to your point. I should have speculated more, but I'm okay with just saying 2. That's fine. That's fine. It sounds like you made some good progress, a lot faster progress in some regards in comparison to the KLR, but no, very cool. So we got to plan a ride, getting to the point where we're getting some nicer weather, but definitely a little bit rainy at times. So, yeah, I don't know, man. It's good. It's good being back on the road, though. That's for sure. And looking forward to being able to get out there on some dual sport adventures now that you got a DR as well.
I'm glad you're still plugging away on the KLR, even though you got a replacement bike. I was concerned you'd set this up and then just throw that into boxes and store it on the top shelf of your garage. So I'm glad you're still putting the time and effort into that, because I agree. It's going to be awesome to get out. I know you've got some Eastern Oregon adventures that you owe the group, whether you know it or not. I'm excited to see what you map out and plan for us, and we're gonna have some fun. I think we've got the right vehicles. We can throw them if we want to do a longer trip, right, or start from a longer base camp. Throw them in a truck, head out there, and then basically, right, lock the trucks up for 3-4 days while we do nothing but ride and camp.
Yeah.
So I think that's a fun opportunity that I've got now, and I didn't really have before with just the dirt bike. I always felt a little too outlaw on a trip like that, running the dirt bike with enough paved roads in between, knowing that it probably wasn't worth the risk, and it's 100% illegal. So now that I can legally do all that, I'm pretty excited to join the crew. And I know you're hopefully just a few months from finishing out the KLR, right?
Yeah, no, I'd like to have it done in the next month. The goal was initially to have it done by Easter weekend, and just a lot's kind of gone on, but I'm still making progress and getting the valves in and such definitely helped get me back on track. So I believe that I have everything at least to get it running. Once it's running, then I need to do tires. I need to look at doing fork seals, but running and riding is a huge milestone for it, and then the rest just follows suit. So yeah, should be good to go.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, you're not too far. I mean, Easter is not like it's tomorrow, so you've got a bit of time, and it sounds like you're doing pretty well to that goal. You may be a bit behind, but I don't know that there's anything big happening till a few weeks after Easter anyway. So you'll be on par to be able to make probably the first run, quite frankly.
Yeah, I think so. I think I should have the cylinder and head bolted down by hopefully this weekend, and then be able to go from there. Yeah.
Nice, good work, man. So yeah, to all of those points, I know you've got some valves. I don't know when you're planning to do it. You've got some valve change or valve adjustments. Maybe it's just a valve check if you're lucky and the vibration is just normal and you didn't know it.
Yeah.
But those twins can be a bit that way sometimes, so could very well just be normal. But yeah, I know that there is a plan at the moment to kick off the community garage here at Slacker Moto. So if you're in the Portland metro area, let's call it, you can come from anywhere, Seattle. Heck, you can come from New York if you want to drive all the way out just to adjust some valves. But we're planning the inaugural visit for some valve changes because I believe that the Chicken Hawks ride needs a valve adjustment. And that's going to be a flat 4. It's going to be a bit of, or an inline 4. It's going to be a bit of a job. So I figure if I'm spending a full day doing that, might as well have a few others come by and we can all learn and help each other. So if you don't know how to do it, we'll have more details on the specific dates. But I think that'll be a good opportunity for everybody to come and we can get that kind of kick off and see how it works out here for the community garage. I think there's enough
exciting.
people that I think that's an intimidating job for a lot of people. I know at least my first shim on bucket valves were a bit intimidating just because of the amount that you have to remove. And to your point, the Triumph manual for the Scrambler made it seem so scary and so catastrophic if you miss like one little thing, which is true. If you did do it wrong, you really could blow something
It made it sound like this, and it was true.
Well, I mean, I guess the way I'm saying it is true that if you do it wrong, you can cause some big issues. But the room for error was very big. You'd have to purpose. I mean, that's too extreme. But if you just pay attention to what you're doing, it was very easy to not do something wrong.
Keep your eyes open.
Yeah. Well, keep your eyes open. Hold things where they are. Take pictures of where they are, right? If you're worried about your, overhead cam gears moving, just put them in the right spot where the notches line up. Then when you put it all back together, make sure the notches reline up. Like it just wasn't the big ordeal that the manual or the internet said it would be when everybody's taking it to dealers. I'm one of those, you and I both are one of those people, and we hope that our listeners can be as well, that are willing to get their hands dirty and try it. Right. Yeah. But that was one of those that should it go wrong, the effects of that would have been pretty painful, but both possibly physically, but definitely mentally. But at the same point, this is something that is very much doable on pretty much every bike. Obviously, this is something that's common. It's a routine maintenance item on most bikes. So yeah, that's the plan. If you've got or think you're due or maybe very overdue because it wasn't something you were willing to do before, it'd be awesome if we had 5, 6, 7 bikes with the heads off here, doing valve adjustments, sharing a couple of feeler gauges, and let's get her done.
That sounds so scary, but I think it'd be awesome to be with everybody and going through that. But just make sure that if you show up that you have a service manual. That's all I'll ask, please. That is my requirement for anybody that I will walk through any help on anything, whether it be brakes or engine work, is that we have to know the right information. The last thing I want to do is be looking through forums. Just get a service manual. A service manual or a Haynes, something that actually details torque specs and everything else. It also has hints and suggestions for what actually needs to come apart to get into that work. Just have all of that. That's my only request.
I agree. Show up with what you need, right? I don't want to see anything left in here in the shop overnight. So show up with what you need. If you know you need shims, have them ready to go, or know which shop you need to run to, and trailer your bike over, or whatever you need to do. But we'll get into the specifics as we dive into that specific day, and we'll have the rules up as we post it to Facebook. So yeah, keep an eye out for Facebook for that. But I also really wanted to give a shout out because I think they deserve it, because this is not an original idea to Motorcycles and Misfits. I don't know whether they're listening. I hope you are. They're an awesome group that do the Recycle Garage, and it's a pretty impressive project where they do basically community garage every Sunday. And so I don't know that we'll be able to keep up with their pace of weekly, but we will definitely try to have a very clear cadence so we can help our listeners and ourselves keep up on our maintenance. Because one of the easiest ways to keep yourself safe is to make sure your bike is safe to ride. Obviously you can do something stupid, or somebody can do something stupid to put you in danger, but there's nothing worse than going down just because you missed a simple maintenance item.
No, absolutely. And whether or not the valves are the biggest one, but they are critical. It's a good starting point.
Yep. So yeah, there'll be simpler things we can do, and if all you need to do is an oil change or a brake job, by all means you're invited as well, because we can help you through that pretty easy. But I think valves is a pretty good learning environment to start if you're willing to get your hands dirty and put a little bit of risk into it. So we'll start with that. We'll get more information. Again, keep up on Instagram and Facebook for that information as it comes out. Otherwise, appreciate you joining us. Check out slackermoto.com. There's a number of changes. We keep saying it, and it keeps adjusting a little bit the website. So if you find those changes, feel free to shout out and let us know that you found them. Otherwise, yeah, that's not really a big deal there. But yeah, we look forward to joining with you next week, and hope everybody has an awesome week. It's getting to be that season, at least in the U.S., that we hope to catch you on the road as well.
That being said, until next time, ride on!